The first topic that I want to jump into,
Mm,
I sent you this tweet the other day,
mm.
and it is this fellow, Say Mehdi on Twitter. I have absolutely no idea who this guy is, but he posted a beautiful picture of Mr. Jeff Bezos with his new wife and then some other lady. And kind of a hot take here, and it just caught my eye. The tweet is, "This is the optimal billionaire, not starting creepy NGOs, think tanks, vaccine funds, or calling for open borders. No moralizing or posting about politics. Just running his business while looking like a GTA character on his yacht with his girlfriends and living his best life." I thought that this was hilarious because Jeff, I mean, a million reasons,
Mhm.
but Jeff Bezos does just like fly under the radar of getting any sort of social criticism. If you ever hear a billionaire being criticized, it's Bill Gates, it's Elon Musk.
Vocal billionaires.
Yeah, it's all the people who like really, have a worldview and they're trying to like shove it down everyone else's throats, kind of for better or
Right.
worse, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos is just kind of like living his best life, like with his little rocket ship company and everything.
Yeah.
And so like, there's a part of me that completely disagrees with this because it's so just kind of like when you're at that level of like privilege, right? Like you kind
Mhm.
of should try to do the world some good. But then it's kind of like, I don't know, billionaires shoving their mentality down the world's throat is also kind of gross. And who knows if they're
Yeah.
getting anything right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to segue into, not yet, but it's just like I wrote about this a little bit this week with Bill Gates and
Right.
Elon
Right.
Musk. So I do want to talk about them. But first, let me get your take on this tweet and on the life cycle of Jeff Bezos.
Quick promo article by Peter Clark on MerionWest.com. Killer article. Go check it out and tag Peter Clark in his beautiful writing. Um,
Yeah, I want to segue to that because
It
there's
was
a
a
lot
killer.
there too.
I'll be excited to talk about it because it was really, really well written and thoughtful, and I liked it. And it made me think about some stuff.
Nice.
Bezos. So coincidentally, my girlfriend was watching an interview with him yesterday that I kind of got to ear hustle on, thinking about the pod today. First of all, eminently reasonable dude, like
Mhm.
pretty. He's like really, well, like I don't think I took issue with a single thing he said in the entire course of the interview.
What interview was it?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. He was just talking about business. It was like some kind
Oh,
of
okay.
it was him talking about business, and his business practices are borderline unassailable. Like he's really a sharp dude. In terms of the way he like runs his company and the way that he kind of understands people and the way he understands kind of human psychology and the psychology of like a boardroom and meetings and stuff like that. It was really cool. I mean, one of the examples that I remember from yesterday was he was like, anytime you're having a meeting, you try to have the most junior person speak first, and then you go in order of seniority to the top because you don't want anyone's opinion to be influenced by someone who has a power dynamic above them. And I was like, wow, that's a very anthropological, intuitive, almost like sociological take on how to structure a meeting in a way where everybody gets good ideas on the table and nobody feels intimidated.
I've
And I
never
thought,
heard that before. That is good. Yeah.
yeah, and there was a bunch of shit like that. There was a bunch
Hmm.
of stuff where I was like, "Ah, that is totally like check, file that under best practices." Um, comedically, comedically, it's like you look at that picture and you're like, damn, like haven't been watching much like TikTok or Instagram lately, have you, Bezos? Like still hunting for those like MILF Hunter 2002 Brazzers chicks, those blown out like blown out porn chicks, or like it's just crazy that like that's his like his idea of a 10 is like
Right.
a legit Midwestern 4, like
I
um
mean, in that picture, the woman on his left or our left, I guess, is
yeah.
that's his wife, right? Like they got married, right? Didn't he leave
Yeah,
his wife?
which also
Who like
cracks me up.
objectively, I think was better looking just because she looked so much more natural.
Oh,
But
she's
this
like a
woman,
beautiful
she was
woman, yeah.
she was a newscaster, right? And kind of semi-famous in her own right or something, I think.
I don't know anything about the
Even if
lady.
it was Elon Musk, I would know way more just because I'm so like he's
So
so
much more tapped
tabloid
in. Right.
naturally, yeah. Whereas Jeff Bezos, even though he went through this whole like got divorced, midlife crisis, rocket company,
Normal
new
guy
wife,
shit.
Yeah, it's kind of normal and it's kind
You
of
know,
boring.
he
There's
seems
nothing
pretty
like,
normal.
yeah.
That's the thing is he doesn't seem eccentric at all. Like he just seems like a guy that had a goal and tried to get real smart about achieving it and did, you know.
I
And
did just listen to him on the Lex Friedman podcast. He was on
okay.
that like 2 weeks ago. That
Hmm.
was like the first time in my entire life I've sat down and like listened to him speak long form like
Yeah.
that. And yeah, like down to earth, he weirdly sounds like a surfer
Yeah.
pro, which is kind of
Yeah.
odd, his
Hmm.
inflection.
Hmm.
And yeah, seems very just kind of personable and not megalomaniacal or whatever, like that much. I
Seems
don't know.
chill.
So yeah, but okay, let me jump into like the crux of this tweet.
Yeah, yeah.
That's where a lot of people found like hyper offensive, right?
Oh,
So,
interesting.
or I mean, like maybe I don't know, because I could just hear like Kara Swisher. I could like to channel her view for a second. It would be
Hmm.
a little bit more kind of like you owe the world something if you have benefited this much from the global economy, from capitalism.
You do.
Um, you probably owe the world something because like none of that, like Jeff Bezos, for example, he's talked about this too. He could have never done without what he did without like roads, the postal service, the
Yeah.
internet, like all of
Yeah.
this the structure the society built around him. He
Yeah.
just took advantage of that. And so
Hmm.
you got to like pay it forward a little bit. And he would say maybe
Yeah.
that's what he's doing with his rocket company to some degree or something. I don't know. But like I don't know, like what do you think about just like
Do we do
billionaires
we
should
re-
do this, or should they just do lean into like the hot women thing?
No, I think it's not even a question of like should we hold other people to some like objective moral standard. It's that as a society we need to have bumpers on the bowling lane. You know, it's like so for me at this entire conversation, I kept trying to think of a different angle, but it all kept revolving around, in my mind, a wealth cap. Like you can't, I don't think it's just to allow someone to and this was actually the kind of crux of my thought, was that in a weird way, not having a wealth cap for personal wealth is anti-democratic, because you're allowing a person to amass an amount of public influence that is disproportionate with with anything, right? Like basically it allows a single person this platform that really only an elected official should have. And I yeah, I don't know. I just kept coming back to that over and over again, that we can't really expect a single person to police themselves when they're at the absolute extremity of human experience when it comes to wealth and having things. And like the monkey brain, it doesn't matter how wise you are, how many years you've had on this earth, like having that much stuff is an inconceivable thing for a single person to contain. And
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just
Okay.
don't think it's right. I think as a democratic society, we have to cap people's influence at a certain level and say, okay, now you're starting to get into the political field. Now you're starting to amass like this huge amount of influence, and we got to kind of chop that down a little bit so that you're not competing with political structures for influence.
See, I say like I totally see this both ways.
Cool.
My liberal heart totally wants to agree with you.
Sure.
Let me agree with you for a second here. A friend of mine, Dane Fitzgerald, who's actually been a guest on this podcast before, he retweeted the tweet about Bezos being a baller and said,
Mm-hmm.
moralistic political billionaires are all on the left, so don't be moralistic and political.
Mm.
I disagree with that because there are so many examples of billionaires on the right, the Koch brothers, for God's
The
sakes.
Koch
And
brothers.
they use their billions from like oil and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Specifically to fund a lot of politicians on the
Yes.
right who have
Yeah.
done legitimate harm to our
Yeah.
democracy and to I think, our culture. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to name a good thing that they've done other than like have their cool wine collection or whatever.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that because like I don't think that anybody should be a kingmaker in the way that like the Koch brothers kind of are. Like
Right.
that's just it is fundamentally anti-democratic and it fundamentally could ruin our society at some level. So yes, I
Yeah.
mean that harm is a major bullseye. The other side of this where I want to like push back a little bit
Mm-hmm.
is the idea that like right now, if we're talking about political influence and that sort of thing, it's not necessarily just money. It can be something like a Joe Rogan figure
Sure.
if someone who is like, yeah, sure, like
Cultural.
wealthy, but like just like a cultural figure who knows what elections Joe Rogan has swayed or whatever, that like no one's like
Sure.
been able to piece together and document, like who knows.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think that like the forces of like manipulating culture, they are very complicated,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to like put the blame on something. And why I do kind of flip side like billionaires having, king levels of money, is because we have our government cannot do big projects anymore. They just can't.
True.
And we
Yeah.
need to do big projects. And the
Yeah.
perfect
True.
example of this is that like NASA has abandoned so many projects over the years just because they weren't funded properly. Even when
Right.
NASA was like funded to the max, it was like I think to like 2 or 3% of our budget. I mean, it's not that much money for like what like epic scale of project this is for benefiting
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah.
So maybe you need a guy with couple extra tens of billions of dollars to throw around to get us maybe out of climate
To push the
change
bleeding
with
edge.
electric cars, to get us, off this planet in case this world, comes to an end in the next couple hundred years, et
Sure.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe cure cancer even. That's,
Yeah.
probably the government will have something to do with that, but probably also big business and like billionaires are going to have something to do with that.
Yeah.
On and on and on and on. And like, I don't know if you just like maybe jump forward into the future and look back and tally up the most epic wins of humanity, how many will be because of governments versus how many will because of people who have huge brains and huge amounts of wealth and they don't have to like get voter approval or whatever at some level to like push things forward. Okay.
Well, those things are
those are I think intention. Yeah.
no, that's killer, man. And I think those are really, really good. There's a lot of tension in this conversation because there's a lot of truths that are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And like that's one of them where like the government, it provides the infrastructure for billionaires to exist, and so they're really kind of like vertical from each other instead of kind of being in competition in a certain way. And so like in the long form of history, what'll be more important, billionaires or governments? Well, one wouldn't exist without the other. So it's kind of, but I think you're right. I do like that people have the ability to charge into undiscovered territory. In your article, you mentioned, Musk saying, well, I don't do a lot of like philanthropic stuff because everything that I do is philanthropic because I'm trying to advance the human race. And I actually agree with him because all of his things, and in a weird way, Bezos too, like, without saying it, I mean, Amazon, people talk a lot of shit about Amazon. I'm going to try not to get off topic too much here, but how much time and money has Amazon saved me? Like I can effortlessly compare, 10 different things. I can get the most durable thing that's going to last me the longest amount of time, and I don't have to go somewhere for it. I can pay somebody to bring it to me. I mean, that saves everybody a lot of time, and like a lot of productivity and a lot of buying, going somewhere to buy something and then seeing the better thing that lasts longer somewhere else, blah, blah, blah. So I like that. But I think the problem is we're living in a society right now where the bottom needs to come up one notch and everybody else can kind of stay where they're at for a while because everybody's pretty fucking comfortable right now. Except for like middle of America, they're like chafing at the edges of their social kind of constructs, but that's their own problem. They'll figure it out, But the fact is that we've got these people that are homeless and on the edge of homelessness, and then we've got the billionaires. And I think that is the thing that creates the fundamental tension in the society, because I think if everybody was doing okay, nobody would give a fuck if there was billionaires. But because we've got such a sizable chunk of our the humans that live in our country that are struggling at the lowest level, we got to notch those people up. And I think that the most intuitive way is to have some kind of fucking progressive post World War II style progressive tax where, yeah, sure, your business can be worth $30 billion, but you personally can't control that amount of wealth. It has to be supervised by a board of directors and a corporate structure. And I think that
yeah, I have a lot of questions about that, just like how that would work. And I mean, kind of practically speaking,
where that money would go.
billionaires do actually leave countries and take their money, their ball and go home, right? And I like one little note there that I want to say, like
Sure.
a semi-callous thing, but I think this is also true and never gets said in these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
is that to quote the Bible, I'm actually going to quote the Bible here, Devin. Get ready.
All right.
Buckle up. Jesus said, ready? The poor will always be with you. And I think that that's actually clearly objectively true. Looking at any society, like there's always poor people. And I don't think that the poor people should be the ultimate scapegoat for not being ambitious and doing cool shit. And you see this all the time. Like San Francisco can't do this because it has poor people.
Sure.
Seattle can't do this because it has poor people. It's like
Poverty's
that's just
different.
an excuse just because there always will be poor people, and they can't like make it so that we can't have nice things. You know what I mean?
No.
Basically, fundamentally. And I know I would myself caveat that in a million different ways because we should like that's a project to solve, and I think it's kind of solvable at this point in history. Let's focus on that. But in the meantime, we can't kneecap ourselves from pushing society forward and humanity forward. Otherwise, we never would have had social progress. We never would have developed things like the toilet or whatever, like technological advancements.
Yeah, but we're in a different era right now. We're in an era where for the first time in human history, the family group has been compartmentalized and separated from each other. And so poverty in the sense that in the biblical sense didn't exist in the way that it does today. Like in a biblical sense, like a poor person would be like a Mexican poor person where they've got a lot of family and there's always a place to stay. And with the exception of the person that's an extreme. Listen, hear me out. There's there was community infrastructure. There's always throughout the span of human history has been community infrastructures, whether familial or cultural. There's no culture that's ever been so fully divorced from their context as like a familial and community-based species as Americans or modern humans have. And so there's an isolation and destitution that doesn't exist that exists in a special way that poverty. So like you look at the lowest section of people and that they are by relation dealing with life at a different socioeconomic level. But then now we've got a class of people that are literally just kind of clinging to life. And
well, I mean, this is where I do want to push back because like in the actual text that I'm quoting from the Bible here, Jesus isn't referring to like people who don't have enough goats or whatever, but they have a tight family. He's talking about the lepers outside of the village who are dying because they have leprosy and no one can touch them and they don't have families like they're, you know what I mean? And they're clinging to Jesus's thing as he walks by to saying like, help me, savior or whatever, you know what I mean? So they are talking about the equivalent of the modern homeless person. Like that actually is who he's talking about. Maybe a bill.
All right,
I'll
take that. I think I think it's a stretch between saying between leprosy and economic and like generational poverty is a little.
Man. Fentanyl bombs. Is that the modern leper?
That's true, but leprosy wasn't.
Why I'm arguing this.
No, it's okay. I like it. But you think about leprosy, right? Like leprosy, is not a choice, right? It's a disease that you catch. And, you know, also arguably alcoholism and drug abuse, a disease that you can catch potentially, you know, depending on what model you subscribe to of addiction. Yeah, totally. But again, I still think leprosy colony, right? Like there was a place for those people. They all were together and they received support from the community. Like that was the whole
drug tents.
Yeah.
My parallel's holding up here, man.
Well, but I do think that there's a functional difference between people who are at the absolute lowest rung of our society and people who have been at the lowest rung of any other society ever, because there is a full divorce of
but we're richer. We're significantly richer.
We are significantly richer as a society, but
at every level. But I think homeless people have cell phones get $400 a month, at least in San Francisco. Yeah,
but do they have a connection to a cultural center or to a familial center? Because if you look at people who are impoverished in Greece, they're living a way different life. They're living a culturally rich life, and they're living a familially rich life that they almost couldn't be divorced from because they're embedded in it, and we don't have that here.
the ultimate super super mega hardcore deep truth that you're very right on here, and I actually do agree with you. I'm just kind of like having fun here.
I
But
love it.
you know how like England and a lot of countries in Europe are like way poorer than us, like
Yeah.
Alabama poor, like
Yeah, but
poorer
there's
than,
not that many
but
homeless people.
yeah, and it's just
Yeah, go
because
to
their
It's the same
society's
thing in Mexico,
still
dude.
same
You,
in Mexico. Exactly. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there's
You know where I'm
almost
going with
none.
this. Yep.
There
Mhm.
almost none, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's so it you do have to look at that in terms of like modern humans are in a different predicament than any other humans have been throughout the course of history, because monetarily, you're right, there's always going to be poor people. I think also too, it's a little in the weeds, right? But I think that that is the fundamental tension between billionaires and society right now, is that there's all these people where everybody's going, well, Elon Musk buys Twitter for $40 billion. Couldn't you have put every single homeless person in the United States in a home for that much? You know what I'm saying? And because
And practically speaking, no, because of it's
sure,
the more
because
money
it's
that
not
we
that
put in
easy.
homelessness, the worse it gets. And like it's
Oh,
because
no.
we have the wrong approach.
Except for putting people in homes, which is something that for some reason hasn't been tried. So
No,
yes,
no,
as soon as
dude,
you,
that's
as
the thing. But that's also the thing that Musk couldn't do. He couldn't just go out
sure,
and build houses. But that's what
sure,
we need to do as a society. Like I
true.
think it's over 1 million homes we have a shortage of, or something like this, or maybe it's like
Yeah, yeah,
3 million.
yeah.
It's like the market just that does not have enough houses across the entire country,
Right.
with some exceptions. Some places have too many homes, but they have no economy. But yeah, that's the thing he can't do. Like Musk can't just roll up to San
Right.
Francisco and say, I'm going to build a high rise with 20 new homes or 20,000 new homes in it. Like he can't do
Yeah.
that. That's what like needs to kind of sort of happen. Or
Sure.
Mountain View, you know what I mean, wherever. We've been teasing this, Devin. We've been teasing the whole like Musk thing that I wrote about. So let me like actually pitch my article
Pitch it.
and I'll have you respond to it. And the Merion West editor actually came to me a couple of weeks ago and asked if I would write about Elon Musk in the context of that thing he said at the New York Times
The advertisers go
interview.
fuck yourselves.
Yeah, when he told the advertisers to go fuck themselves,
Awesome.
and because like they left, they were leaving Twitter.
I love that corporate America, first of all, just to say this before we get into it, was like aghast as if he had said like the N-word. They were like, fuck the advertisers. It was like it felt to me so histrionic, to somebody that's like not in like marketing or advertising, but it's clearly to people in power that was patently absurd for someone to say that.
It was absurd though. Like I will argue
Sure.
that it was absurd just because like why it's absurd, and then I want to pitch my article. But
Please.
why it's absurd is that he makes that in the context of thinking that the advertisers are against free speech and like punishing him for his free speech or whatever. Advertisers are expressing their free speech to say we're just not going to advertise here. And why in the world would we advertise on the platform? Scott Galloway has talked about that, like if in others who like work in business and work in marketing. And I've actually had some of these roles before. I've been a marketer before, and like you're like in a boring office room, and you're gonna divvy up where you're gonna put your ad dollars for the month. No, like these are very boring, risk-averse people. Fundamentally, you're not gonna put your money on the platform that has even like a 0.001% chance of being next to some sort of a Nazi thing or whatever that can someone just has to happen once, and one person has to screenshot it, and then you lose your job. You know what I mean?
Totally.
No one's gonna do that, and
Nobody's gonna do that.
That's their free speech, and they're like rational. They're being rational, making a good choice to say like, let's just hands off Twitter, guys. Just sorry. Okay. Anyway, so he's an idiot not to know that, and he does know that because you know why I know he knows that? Because he is so hyper rational, Musk, when he talks about China.
True.
When he talks about China, he's very measured. He's very calm. He doesn't do these free speech bullshit rants. And it's because he does actually know how to run a business, is that he has this like petty vindictiveness thing against like the quote unquote woke left, which
I know.
Who cares? We all fucking do, right?
I know, dude. Like it's time to put down the hobby horse, bud. Like him and Joe Rogan need to go to some kind of fucking re-education camp for people who are like leaning too far right in a weird way, in like a way where you're like
vindictive.
Now where it's not like the wholehearted kind of like, I'm just a guy with family values. It's like, fuck these guys. They can't tell me I can't say fat. you know. Like, nah, they can. You gotta stop saying that.
Okay. I'm gonna run head first and pitch my goddamn article.
Yeah, get in there.
Because I want your hot takes on it. Okay, so I wouldn't actually have written about this.
Okay.
But the editor asked me to, and I like them a lot. So I tried to find an angle that no one else had written about.
Cool.
Which is very hard because everyone has written an article about Musk, right? In every capacity.
Sure. So Shit, I've written an art. No, I haven't. Go ahead.
Well, the first topic that sparked my mind was that Musk is turning into Howard Hughes. Like Kara Swisher has said this, like a lot of people have said this, you know, the billionaire who becomes crazier and crazier and then goes off the deep end, right? You know, there's whole movies about that.
Yeah.
Google that. And for sure, 1 million people had already written about that. So it's like, okay, I can't go that direction.
All right.
But and I disagree with that too. I don't think he is either. But then there's this curious thing that Elon Musk has said that has always been very curious to me when he's asked about his philanthropy. Like the TED guy, Chris, whoever, asked him about philanthropy on a podcast about a year ago. And Elon Musk has said that he is, even though he doesn't really do much philanthropy, all of his companies are philanthropic. If you think that being a philanthropist is loving humanity. And so he's trying to save humanity through all of his business ventures.
He's the first, let me just say, he's the first middle class philanthropist. Where he's like a philanthropist, but he only helps the middle class.
That's funny. Yeah.
He's like, my dream in life is to help the middle class become upper middle class.
I didn't even think about that, but that's pretty insightful.
Because none of his philanthropy has anything to do with people in poverty. It's only, he's like, we're providing internet to the most underserved middle class people on earth, we're providing electric vehicles to mostly middle class people and
mostly
solar
upper
panels
middle class people.
Yeah, dude, it's like the comedy of it. There's a bit in there somewhere about how a billionaire just can't see past a certain economic level and sees probably people who make $30,000 to $50,000 a year is desperately destitute. He's
okay, well, that's really
we've
funny.
got to help these people, dude.
Okay, so to tie it together for my thesis here, then I'll shut the hell up about this. But I do think this is kind of interesting. I think it landed at an interesting little point here. So Elon Musk thinks that all of his companies are philanthropy. Okay, so little bow on that. A new book just came out about Bill Gates and about how his philanthropy and the Gates Foundation ostensibly does all this good for the world and et cetera, et cetera. But if you look into it a little bit, it is more about a power thing, a power move on his behalf. One example is that he will come in and say, this is the way that this should be done. Vaccines for this disease in this community, for example, or we're going to teach education in schools this way and only this way. Other people will try to come in organizations and be like, maybe you should try it this way, or this isn't actually working. This education system that you develop is actually making kids worse off. And he'll be like, no, this is the way we're going to do it. And by the way, the government is matching all the funding that we're doing. And so your taxpayers are also going into my vision and exclusively my vision, excluding everyone else's potential philanthropy into this area. So he'll it's big, power, and he'll meet with the most powerful people and it's, him playing chess with the world.
Right.
That is kind of sort of what Elon Musk is doing, but with his companies. Yeah. But if you think his companies, take him at his word, are philanthropy, then he is way more Bill Gates than he is Howard Hughes. And that's the pitch that I made. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, how could you disagree with that? You're right. What you in the article you talk about how there's kind of this, there's a pardon me using two $10 words in the same podcast, but there's a histrionic energy to the way that people deal with Elon Musk and his that he's shown his ass with Twitter, that he's truly shown the ugly details of his asshole with Twitter, and it's making people unsettled because all of the other businesses he has are running fine, and it seems like there's some kind of weird incongruity there where you're like, well, wait a minute, if he's this unhinged when it comes to social issues, then how is he managing these other companies well? But it seems like he kind of is. And yeah, I mean, I don't see him. Every time I see an interview with him that's not about a social issue, he seems pretty composed and pretty reasonable and pretty affable, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
You know, and doesn't seem to be devolving too badly into chaos. I mean, I think he definitely is having a Joe Rogan moment where he must have like started hanging out with a different circle of people, and like, you know how it is, man. People chatter around you for long enough, and like you kind of maybe subtly start picking up those ideas without realizing it. And like, I feel like there's some like, I don't know, like mission creep, or like, you know what I mean, with Musk and with people like Rogan, where they started at a very balanced place, but then obviously found themselves in rarer air with people maybe whose opinions they respected more. And I've seen both of them, you know, start shying to the right, not because of a desire for like, not because of a love for right-wing policy, but because of a hatred of certain left-leaning ideas. Which I find weird and problematic and pathetic in a certain way, that as a person who's spent a lot of their life pursuing self-awareness, I find it quite frankly pathetic that a person in their 50s would be so kind of like clearly steered by something panicky and fear related. Yeah, I don't know. I do kind of take him at his word that he's doing philanthropic things for humanity at large, and Tesla and Solar City and the Boring Company and everything that he does is ostensibly pushing humans forward in a cool way. I mean, SpaceX, you know, all of this stuff. I have very few issues with Elon Musk and his like philanthropy, other than the fact that everybody's looking at the bottom 2% of people and being like, well, I don't know, you know, somebody's got to die. You know what I mean? And it's like the whole idea of being philanthropic for the middle class, to me, like I made a joke about it a minute ago, but that was something that kind of galled me about reading that article and thinking about Elon Musk's like philanthropic efforts, where I'm like, yeah, dude, but like, can you do something to try to like bring the bottom up? Can you make some kind of big swipe at a social problem? Can you make some kind of big, and maybe that's what he was trying to do with Twitter, but I think it shows you how underdeveloped we are psychologically as a nation, and how undervalued like psychological and mental wellness are in the kind of collective unconscious of our society, where there's this like mechanical, scientific, overly logical way of approaching you know, it's the effective altruist kind of mentality, where it's like, well, how do I help the most people the most, you know, how do I help the most people the most? But that is kind of ignorant of the cascading effects of wellness throughout society. Like, if we had a more mentally well society, I think it would be a lot more significant than an electric car society. And I'm going to make one analog to this. And here's an example of something that I experienced in my personal life that galls me about environmentalist people, because I live in Berkeley and everybody drives a Tesla. But guess what everybody else has? A bunch of bullshit gadgets in their fucking garage and a bunch of crap, right? A bunch of new little
hippie.
No, seriously. I mean, and I'm surrounded in a technological marvel of a recording studio, truly. And there's a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have like brand new technology. However, the idea that you're an environmentalist because you drive an electric vehicle is insane. I took a truck that was 30 years old. I've been driving it for 10 years. I've already outlasted every fucking electric car on the road. You know, like, I haven't had to replace anything that wasn't more than $50 on that truck. You know what I mean? And in a certain way, it's like we're looking at this section of trying to help humanity by bringing the middle up a level and hoping that everybody clicks up from there. But that's just not how it works, man.
I think, I mean, we'd have to talk to an economist. I do think that actually is how that works. I mean, technically, technically,
but
you know what I mean?
But I know what you mean, but maybe financially, right? but psychologically, like a lot of the problems that we have are not financial, and that's why they're not solved yet, because we live in this wealthy, technologically advanced nation that's completely ignorant of the psychological realities of being a human being. And so we don't know how to deal with addiction. We don't know how to deal with depression. We don't know how to deal with chronic pain. We don't know how to deal with any of the things that make people homeless.
Okay, I will say so many things. Like there's so much there, and like this is all great. You just laid out like 5 podcasts for us to talk about. But,
hell yeah.
Like one thing, like dude, I do think that we actually do have the answers to so many of these problems, and it's like it is like, sadly we just have to get off of our phones. We have to put our phones down, because the richest people in our society and the most successful are kind of the most oppressed. And like there's this chart going around Twitter right now about how people meet these days, like romantic partners.
Yeah.
And the chart is in person and friends and, traditional ways, like plummeting from 2014 on, just like going straight down, and then met online. That line goes just straight up into the corner.
Yeah.
So we're meeting people online. We're having shallow relationships, and we're having not real communities. And then we're also like hyper competitive with each other because of the this is something like I do think we're still in this, easy for a futurist tech optimist like myself to say, but like we are still at the infancy of these technologies, and we just have not figured out how to incorporate them into our lives healthily. And I don't think there's any amount of psychologists or modern science or anything like that that's gonna like get us out of this. We just have to like go through a couple of generations of people having kind of like really hard lives as we learn to incorporate them better.
Agreed.
And I think that some people will just utterly, absolutely, completely fail at this, as they clearly are. And that's just what happens with new technologies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we've been there, done that with everything. And life has always kind of sucked. We just don't have the stats on it necessarily. We just have we have all these statistics about like, oh my God, teen depression is going up. It's like we didn't even measure teen depression a couple hundred years ago. So like, maybe swinging it back around just a teeny bit to Elon Musk.
Yeah. No, but that's my point, is that Elon Musk is the kind of like king autist of this whole movement of logifying, of logifying like society and societal problems while remaining a kind of obtuse, apparently emotionally underdeveloped, like old man. Like, this is what galls me about the current state of billionaires, of society. It's like everybody's gamifying this. Everybody's trying to find this logical conclusion to the rat race, when the messy, beating heart, bloody human experience of things is actually the reason why things are going wrong. Because it's not cell phones that are preventing the medical establishment from effectively treating chronic pain. It's not cell phones that are propagating like misinformation about the science of addiction. It's not, you know what I mean? It's like all of these things that we're struggling with as a society have an absolutely clear, crystal diamond cut clear psychological antecedent. We're seeing mass shootings at a level we've never seen because we have people that are culturally, familially, and psychologically isolated for their entire lives. We're seeing this pandemic of psychological problems that are manifesting themselves as economic problems, ecological problems, societal problems, man. And it's like all these dudes at the top, they're all trying to game a way out of it that isn't just as simple as everybody needs somebody to talk to every once in a while. There's little things like that. There's little adjustments in the fabric of society that we've become totally ignorant of that lead us into these dark pathways, man.
Okay, so in the modern world where we currently live, where there are billionaires, and let's just like put ourselves in their shoes for a second.
Sure.
And let's say you wake up, you're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Bill Gates, and you think to yourself, I feel very charitable today. I want to actually make a meaningful difference in the world. And I'm not going to put my name on the hospital, right? No one's going to know. This is not going to be it's not going to make my Wikipedia page, but I'm going to do some good in the world. What does that look like? endless money. Endless money.
I just do feel like, as they're saying, I feel charitable today, there's like 5 slave boys with like pastries on their back crawling towards them as they do every morning. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel charitable today, you know? Oh
Devin,
my
you're
God.
ruining my thought experiment.
I know, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please. I actually forgot about what your thought experiment was because it was overtaken by that disgusting image.
Okay. So, well, I mean, okay, man, I have tangential thoughts that I'm trying to like hold them in. But what? Okay, can I say one tangential thought?
Please.
I'm a little bit sold on the open borders conversation. I really like this guy, Brian Kaplan, because he
Okay.
makes this like super fantastic sort of foolproof argument that if you want to help somebody out globally, like in the world, help someone who's like genuinely, authentically poor,
Yeah.
just open the door for them on one of the modern societies. Let them
Oh,
come in.
100%.
Just like that, their lives are better.
Yeah.
They are economically way more productive.
Yeah. The
They help out
dictatorship that
people
they
at
live
home.
under crumbles because it doesn't have the economic
Yep.
battery power to fucking continue its depravity.
And we benefit as a society because we become more diverse, and
100%.
they become, they're maybe not them. We probably have to give more money to them than they give out, but their kids will put back in
Yeah.
twice as much. And that we know this throughout history.
Can
Okay.
I go ultra conservative on that thought just for 1 second? And it'll be quick. It'll be quick.
Uh-huh.
We got to do something like Sweden does, where when we let people into this country, there's like a 5 to 10 year program of acculturating them. Like that is something that it's like, if you do the thing where like Germany did, where they let, 1 million Syrians in, and then they're just like, cool, man. So just, do your thing. They're going to set up a little Syria in Germany, and it's going to piss everybody off. And it's like, there's something you do need to culturally acclimatize people to a place and not force them to not be in small, insulated communities, but really give them the tools and encourage them to find ways to integrate themselves into the broader community at large, while, retaining the ability and the freedom to keep their traditions, but putting a little gentle pressure on people to not isolate themselves in like hermetic communities of their own people, because that is kind of antithetical to the idea of allowing people to come to a place that has been really well built and can facilitate a cool life for them. You got to pay back in too. And that's something that I think you could call it racist if you were looking at it in a certain way, but it's not. It's just pragmatic. It doesn't matter what culture you're from, or if you're white or non-white. It doesn't matter if you're coming from Sweden or Germany or an Arab country or Mexico. You got to figure out what it means to be an American, and you got to speak a little bit of English so that you can pay back what the society is paying to you in terms of freedom. Like you're reaping this huge dividend of freedom, and like part of your moral responsibility and part of the social contract of immigrating to a country is figuring out how to speak the language and how to, contribute meaningfully to the society culturally.
Yeah, we're blessed in America because we don't have too much of a problem with that.
No, not
Because
we're big. We're a big country.
Second generation kids just speak English.
They fully integrate.
Well,
It's true.
Yeah, not the first generation.
You know what? That's true. That's totally true.
In Northern Europe, they have a hard time. There is so much resentment towards Muslims in the UK right now that I see all over Twitter, and it's like wild, dude. And it's there are all these like people. It seems so awful to say, and I don't even know if it's true, but people always put these stats about like Muslims live in their own communities. None of them have jobs. Like only like 2% of the women in the UK have jobs who are Muslim, and they list off all these things, and it's not like being objective about statistics. These people are saying this with like hate in their hearts. And it's like it's so bad. And like I've never seen that sort of a thing in America, because in America there is this kind of optimism about melting potness, fundamentally.
It happens, but it's isolated. It's not like a pan-cultural phenomenon for us, except for in the wake of 9/11 when there was like Islamophobia, and we haven't still, I think, really fully recovered from that. But generally, it's community to community, and it's something where, I don't know, I spent not a lot of time thinking about it, but I've thought about it a lot and thinking like, yeah, you can open the borders, but if you just create a place where every cultural group has their own kind of like city state, then Like, fuck that, dude. Let's get back to the Bezos. Let's get back to the Elon Musk Bezos thing.
Can we do my thought experiment of like if you, Devin,
Yes.
woke up
Yes,
tomorrow.
please,
Okay,
please.
let's do okay.
I'm glad
okay,
you held
wake
on to
up,
that.
you have 10, how many zeros you want to put on this? Let's $10 billion to just like secretly do something with to benefit humanity.
Throw it in the old cash gun.
What's the project? What do you do? That,
Personally, me, Devin
yeah,
Carson.
You $10 billion. What do you do?
$10 billion. I honestly like craft a 10-year-long marketing campaign to normalize mental health and awareness around the mind. And
isn't that TikTok? Doesn't TikTok just do that? It's all like
no,
young
I mean,
people like,
I mean, true, but I mean, in the way that we talked about like 5 or 6 episodes ago, where you harness the power of AI to speak to specific demographics that are recalcitrant. Like, I think about certain communities. There's like cultural groups that I can think of real easily that are so recalcitrant to the idea of just having someone to talk to. Just the simple, and I'm not even talking about therapy, dude. I'm not talking about a therapist. I'm literally talking about an objective second person to go and just talk to, that you're not related to, that isn't one of your friends. They don't even have to give you advice. Like, I think that's one of the problems with therapy is that people intellectualize it as a way to solve problems because we're so problem solvy in the United States, and we think that everything needs to be fixed. But you really actually, the deepest function of therapy is that you have a recurring person that talks to you that isn't related to you. And like just that increases your ability to maintain a stable mental frame. It increases your ability to have situational self-awareness because you have somebody reflecting back to you that you're not personally connected to in a fundamental way. I mean, there's just really simple techniques of perspective that I see most people missing, and I see how it winds itself through society. And I mean, it's holistic, right? The fact is that to deal with mental health in this country, you would immediately make enemies in the pharmaceutical and in the food industry, because those are the people that are profiting the most heavily from our psychological disease. And it's like, so it would take a lot more than $10 billion. It would take some kind of monolithic movement. Like, what I would do with that $10 billion is I would start a movement like Occupy New York, right? Or like Occupy Wall Street. I would take that $10 billion and I wouldn't do a single physical thing with it. I would use it on a propaganda campaign to disincentivize and compartmentalize the American public from pharmaceutical companies and from
this is your Joe Rogan moment.
This is my Joe Rogan moment. From the agri, I don't even know what to call it, like the agri-industrial complex that keeps feeding us non-foods and disguising them as food. Like, those are the two things that are physically the biggest, in my mind, antecedents of depression and societal, tumult. And then once you've addressed the mechanical issues, then you can kind of start going demographic by demographic and trying to approach people where they're at and understanding what are the psychological problems that are bedeviling this community. You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you have boomer Republicans that are so obsessed with guns and so afraid of brown people? Why do you have all these demographics of people that have different core psychological needs that aren't being met? And why do we not have anything in our society that's attempting to address that at scale?
That is very interesting, because you just spent a couple minutes earlier on this podcast criticizing Joe Rogan. It sounds like that would be exactly his project too, which is interesting. Being like pro healthy food, pro or anti big pharma, pro community.
Elk meat for every American.
There you go. Now we're talking.
I want a Traeger grill in every household. I want an ice dip in every backyard, and I want elk meat on every fucking plate.
No, it's not a bad thing. That's not bad. I mean, I do still like a couple of sides of Joe Rogan, and that's one of the sides of him that
They're going to
I
reference this episode of the podcast when in 20 years I'm leading like a group of 100,000 people to commit mass suicide to like get onto the
I know, right?
The next coming of the Hale Bopp comet.
I am not as anti-big pharma as it is currently hip to be.
Sure.
I think that it still does more good than harm.
Same.
But I
have
do think
nuanced
that
thoughts
there
on
is
it.
the whole complex of it where like doctors are so happy to give you the med and then the med that controls for the side effects of that first med and then like 20 more that, and like I know this from having people in my family who work in the medical industry, and they nonstop go to these conferences.
Right.
And a lot of the conferences paid for by the pharmaceutical companies, and they're just like there to get you to sell their drugs, sort of a thing. And that's where it gets weird. The drugs themselves, and I don't know,
Helpful.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. There is so much wisdom out there that I don't think you can throw it all out the door, because also there's this thing called the pharmaceutical industry. You know what I mean? I think that there's every doctor knows a million times more than we do about all this shit, and just saying they just study drugs, I think, is completely unfair to their profession. So anyway,
look, man, there's a handful of cops that kill black people, and then there's a whole bunch of cops that are just fucking regular dudes actually trying to help people out.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, and I think it's a little more.
There's Jeff Bezos on his yacht with his 50 girlfriends, just hanging out. And you know what? God bless him. Hey man, I gotta wrap this shit up.
Wait, give me 1 minute. Okay, Jeff Bezos, progressive tax. Here's what I want to see. 10 years from now, I want to see a 90% progressive tax on people earning over, fuck it, $10 billion. Everything after that, you don't get to keep it anymore. And the other thing I want to see is receipts for the goddamn taxes that I pay. So if you motherfuckers are collecting that $100 billion a year from these 10 billionaires, I want to know where that shit is going, dude. Or at least make something up, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're right. You can't just take money from people and have zero accountability, because people are fucking crooks, because somebody's going to end up with that money in their pocket. What we need is a progressive tax and accountability for where our fucking taxes are going. Itemized. I want itemized receipts, God damn it.
All right, I'll leave it there. Hey man, good chats. That was a fun one.
Good one.